Okay, Mrs. Bukema, I think it's 7:02. If you'd like to begin, thanks for having us here at Harrison High School tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm actually here at Harrison High School, so I wish that I was here with everyone from our school community tonight, as we typically would do a meeting, but as we know, nothing is typical this school year. So I want to thank you for joining on the other side of the screen for tonight's presentation. Tonight's presentation will include information on the physical health and safety, some of which is going to be a review, some of which will be new with the full return of students. We're also going to share continued social emotional work that has been a part of our practice, and also some things that will be additions for the ongoing rest of the school year. In addition, co-curricular, curriculum and instruction, and upcoming events will all be a part of tonight's presentation. So hang on to the end. We have many partners on the panel tonight, as Dr. Wool mentioned. I think 19 when I looked at the panelist count that will be here for the duration of the webinar. Some of whom you're going to get to hear more from later in this presentation. But I do want to recognize all of them that are joining us tonight as panelists. So without ado, here they are. Our Harrison Central School District Board President, Kelly Mangan, Trustee Rob Sullivan, Trustee Dennis DiLorenzo, and Trustee Noreen Lucy. And I just want to thank the school board for all of the support that they have given us from the start of the school year and the pandemic. They've always been supportive, but it's been particularly stretching for all of us and for all of them. So thank you for everything that they have done and working with Dr. Wool, who, as everyone knows, is already on this call with us, and you've heard from him already. Also joining us is Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Michael Greenfield, who will be presenting later. Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. Ladwig. Assistant Principals, Mrs. Lori Griffo and Mr. Mastrota. And Directors, Mrs. Veronica DeAndrea, who is our Director of Math. Mrs. Marlene Colonna, who is our Director of Social Studies. Mr. Christopher Galano, who is our Director of Athletics and Physical Education and Health. Mrs. Stephanie Goldman, who is our Interim Director right now of Fine and Performance Arts. Dr. Jamie Cantor, who is our Director of English Language Arts. Mrs. Kelly Melchevsky, our Director of Guidance. Dr. Joan O'Keefe, our Director of Science and Technology. And Mrs. Antonia Samayo, who is our Director of Special Services or Special Education. And I want to thank those who are on the other side of this webinar tonight that are sitting in the audience. First, to our PTA, who supported us from the start of the pandemic last school year and who have continued to support us. And you will see that in some of the upcoming events we have towards the end of the school year. To the parents, it's been, to nothing say but an unusual dynamic that school has had with parents for this past school year. We have been in your homes as a guest conducting classes with your children. And you have been also in our teachers' homes and also guest in some of our homes this evening as part of this webinar. So we just want to thank you for the partnership, the kind emails that you have given to the school, to our teachers, to us as administrators. You've given us a lot of grace this school year, and we just really appreciate that support and the support you've given in teaching your children with us at times. So it's been, I'm sure, a challenging experience to be a parent during this pandemic. Also, our students, who many of whom may be joining us on this call tonight with their parents. We have already done some meetings with students, but they have just shown themselves to rise to the occasion and actually adapt to this better than some of us as adults have in terms of the expectations we've had. And you're going to hear some of the accolades for them later this evening, but we just really appreciate them as partners in all of this. And of course, our faculty and staff of Harrison High School, who, while they're not panelists tonight, they have been the backbone of everything that has occurred this school year. So I get teary-eyed when I even think of everything that they have done to support students throughout the course of this school year. I think of how our office staff has stepped up in ways and demands to fill needs, especially when we've had to be short-staffed. Our custodians have stretched themselves, I think, beyond what any of us ever could have hoped with all of the extra work they have had to do this school year. Our TAs and aides have stepped up to support students in ways that have been, and many parents have seen this actually in their home because some of that support has been virtual to students, but in ways that demands have exceeded what any of our expectations could have been. Our mental health team, which includes school counselors, our school psychologists, our social worker here at the high school. I'm sure I'm leaving people out of that team, but thank them for all the supports they have been, not just to our students, but to all of us. And of course, our teachers. Our teachers have done more than I would ever be able to do had I been called on and been a teacher at that time. They have reimagined. It takes years to hone the art and craft of teaching. And while it takes years to do that, they have had to completely recraft that in a short amount of time. So they have really made everything work. And when I get a kind email from a parent of appreciation, I actually have to give that back to the teachers because they're the reason why everything is working so well. So without any further ado, we're going to get to tonight's presentation. So Dr. Wool.
Thank you very much, Kim, and all those recognitions well deserved. And tonight, as we go through this, I'm going to remind folks of how we can help one another to successfully keep our high school open for a long time. In case you relate to the meeting, there are a couple of things, just some basics. Put your questions in the Q&A. The chat will be used by the panelists to give you direct links so that if we reference something, you can have immediate access to it. So before I get into the nitty-gritty, let me just remind you of a couple of things. That everything we say tonight could change, and that's important to remember. I was riding home preparing for this meeting, and I noticed that New Jersey, which had suddenly had a full reopening, is now quickly crashing and burning. And that's an artifact of adults making bad decisions. So one of the things that we were asked last night in the presentation at LMK is, when will we know that schools have to close again? And we won't know, but what is in our hands is our own behavior. So a reminder that if we work together, I'm really confident that we have a plan in place that will allow our students to finish this academic year in person. So today was a big day. Elementary schools all returned. Ms. Goldman, who in her other life is the assistant principal at the Parsons Memorial School, saw all of her children for the first time in one place in our schools. Our plan at the moment is to bring all of your children, 6 through 12, back on April 7th. That's a Wednesday. We deliberately chose Wednesday because we wanted 2 hybrid days in between. We are hopeful that people will adhere to what was heretofore required quarantining after a travel excursion. It is no longer required, but as you know from my letter, I'm asking that if you come back from travel, that you self-quarantine for 4 days and that you get a PCR test showing that you're negative before you return to school. Why is that important? Because we want to keep our schools open. And what we have learned is throughout the course of this year, almost never has an infection occurred person to person in our schools. It's been brought into our schools from folks who were exposed outside. So we are tentatively planning to return on Wednesday, April 7th. What could change? I have made certain criteria essential in order for us to reopen school. You'll hear about that, but one of the variables out of my control is the delivery of these air filtration systems. At this point in time, I believe we're going to easily meet the target, but you will hear from me before the end of spring break to verify that our start date is April 7th. Next slide, please. How do we make this decision? What's really going on? What's different? We're going to talk about what's different because a lot is different. But every decision I've made throughout the summer and going forward has always been with the health and safety of children and adults at the forefront. My greatest concern prior to now was actually the safety for adults, because as we know, COVID-19 has a much more devastating effect on adults than it does on children. But we were also worried about your children. I'll talk about how we address that concern in a minute. The other thing that was critically important to us, and it was last summer, and it will be again this summer, is how do we maintain some continuity of learning for our students as they go hybrid, virtual, quarantine, up, down, in, out? How do we know where they are? You're going to hear more about that tonight. It's not an accident. We've been planning and monitoring throughout. But one big change I want to bring your attention to, we will no longer have a hybrid model. It's gone. When we move to full in-person instruction, you'll have two choices. You can come to school in person, or you can learn virtually, and that will also be different. You will be learning virtually every day, not on your hybrid day. We're going to talk more about that as we get into it, but the hybrid model will be gone. Also at the centerpiece of our planning is the social emotional well-being of your students. We're not just turning the lights on saying, come on back, as if nothing has happened. Your children have been out of school for over a year. It's really hard to believe. It's hard for me to say. And we know that for some kids, the pandemic was no big deal. They just did fine. They worked really well in this environment. Actually, some kids thrived. Some others suffered quite a bit, and some are somewhere in between. We have a plan, we hope, to address the needs of all of that continuum of need that students will have. Next slide, please. So I want to remind you who's in charge. I'd like to believe that I'm in charge and the school board's in charge. It's not fully true. The governor, and in his executive orders, often determines what we can and can't do. He's always had, and we've always agreed on this point, the moment it was safe to bring all children back to school, we should do that. So the governor is one of the authorities we report to. Next slide. Herein lies my great frustration. So that top bullet identifies the New York State Department of Health. They are our ultimate guidance. We must adhere to every one of their mandates. Their last update was in August of 2020. Well, I don't need to tell the people on this Zoom that a lot has changed since that time. However, they've not caught up. Even as recently as March 12th, just a couple of days ago, the CDC updated its guidance. And those of you that have been following along know that for the last month and a half, I've been advocating publicly for some changes. 3 feet of social distancing, and also not requiring barriers in the classroom. Why no barriers? Because they serve no meaningful purpose to protect your children from infection, and they degrade the quality of the experience for kids and teachers, making it much more challenging to teach in that setting. Interestingly, the CDC said they don't require barriers and that 3 feet is acceptable. The most effective weapon we still have, and I'm a researcher, this is not a political statement, it's a research statement. If you wear a 2-ply mask and I wear a 2-ply mask, we reduce the possibility of infecting one another by 91%. Our students, as Ms. Buchema mentioned, have been excellent at following these rules. One of the reasons we're able to do so much so successfully, athletics and performing arts to some degree, is that kids have followed the rules. We're hopeful that the CDC will catch up, and rather the New York State Department of Health will catch up with the CDC. We're going to advocate pretty hard to get rid of some of these things that are not working to our advantage. I already mentioned that we have seen research that says band can be conducted at 6 feet. The CDC agrees. We need New York State to change their mind in order for us to take full advantage of bringing your kids back. You'll hear more about that as we go through tonight's presentation. Next slide, please. This is what I mentioned, but it's a visual. So you're going to have face-to-face learning. The middle of that Venn diagram used to say hybrid learning. It's gone. Online learning will occur every day. Your kids will Zoom in if they choose virtual, although fewer and fewer students are choosing virtual. Next slide. So a word about virtual and a word about teachers. We've tried to be really flexible with allowing you to move to virtual. But let me say that you have to understand that your teachers have been through more than anyone on this Zoom call. They've had to learn a whole new skill set. They've had to manage hybrid kids, virtual kids, in-person kids. They've gone through all kinds of changes. So we're asking you to do 2 things for us. First of all, if you haven't responded to the survey, Dr. Laidwood will put it in the chat right now, telling us whether you're going to be virtual or not. Do so tonight so we can plan effectively. We've been very liberal in how virtual is implemented. We're going to ask that you make a decision and you stick with that decision. However, if you change your mind and you decide, you know what, initially I was fearful, but now I feel safe to return to school, you need only reach out to your principal. She will figure out the impact it will have to bring you back. And if we can bring you back without disrupting classes, you'll be allowed to come back as soon as possible. There'll be no deadline waiting till the end of the marking period. But here's the caveat. We don't expect that you're going to take a virtual option because you're going on vacation or because you're going to go visit some folks. It's unfair to teachers, and we need you to be really focused now that school is reopened. When we say school vacation, that means school's not in session. Let's do everything we can to support our teachers in giving them a stable environment in which to educate your children. So we understand there are going to be some circumstances that can't be avoided. You have a relative that's very ill and you need to go see them. We're not going to live by hard and fast rules, but we're going to ask, as Kim said, to give grace to your teachers. Give them the support that they deserve. Make a decision and live with it. One caveat also, very, very important. In the letter that I sent to you, I said, spring break, when you return, if you haven't planned to self-quarantine 4 days before you return to school, we will permit you to be virtual for that week. We do not want you to come back to school if you went on spring break and somehow may have been exposed and then come back to school and expose everybody else. So we have 2 days of hybrid learning, that Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday's our first full day. If you haven't planned your vacation, make sure you plan it so that you don't miss school. You need 4 days before you come back. I can't mandate that. The governor has taken that out of my hands, otherwise I would. But I'm asking you again to exercise good judgment. Self-quarantine for 4 days, get a negative PCR test before you come back. If you cheat, we won't know. But here's the more important part. If you want to keep our schools open, we need your help. Look to New Jersey. They didn't follow the rules. They reopened restaurants. Now they're closed again. We can do this if we work together. All the other things on this list are pretty much the same. We expect that if you're going to choose the virtual option, you'll be doing it every day. You'll keep your cameras on. So none of these rules are new to your students. So the only new issue here is hybrid is no longer an option, and self-quarantine for 4 days. Next slide, please. So what's changed? Why now? What are the miracles? How come we're suddenly coming back to school? Well, the first and the most important was I was always concerned about the health and safety of folks. As I mentioned earlier, those most at risk were the adults. As soon as vaccination became a possibility for faculty and staff, we encouraged our faculty, and they did an amazing job of finding it on their own. We were ultimately able to get dedicated days from the county to make it available to any faculty or staff member that was medically eligible. So now I feel very confident that our faculty is protected. We've worked really hard to implement surveillance testing in our schools. Why is that important? Because in order for me to keep the schools open, I have to show that there's low infection rate in our schools compared to our community. I don't yet have the data I need from the State Department of Health about infection rates in our community. Hopefully we'll get that. But we needed that surveillance testing. It's in place, and we'll hear more good news about that soon. But the other part that I thought was the most important, and some people have said to me, well, why didn't you buy these air filtrations sooner? The answer to that is simple. They hadn't been invented yet. Now that they are invented and we've field tested them, we found what we think is a state-of-the-art protection for your faculty and students and staff. And this is a long-term investment. It will not only remove COVID from the air, it removes flu, it removes common cold virus. The source of fresh air in our schools can't be understated. It's a value add going forward and now. How effective are these devices? Well, in our typical classrooms, they will literally exchange the air 3 to 5 to 7 times, depending on how high you crank them, in a 45-minute to hour period. So they replace the air. They work equally effective with the windows open or closed. So when the summer months are here, you can still open the windows and have them work. But those were critical. If I had my way, I would not be implementing barriers in the classrooms. That's a mandate. We fought really hard against it. I met directly with the New York State Department of Health. I offered other alternatives, including face shields, but they didn't agree to it, although now it's recommended by the CDC, so we may be able to make that easier on kids and teachers. We're also going to continue all of the important cleansing that we do on a daily basis. You'll hear more about that in a minute. So those are big changes. Vaccinations, surveillance testing, air filtration. That's why I feel confident that if we adhere to good protocols, we're going to be open all the way through graduation. Next slide. So I'm going to talk briefly about this, but I'm going to hand this slide over to Ms. Buchema. You will see a difference when you come back to school. The only reason we can bring you back is because we're going to socially distance you at 3 feet. So Kim, do you want to take them through this slide? I see you have pictures here of kids in hallways and classroom barriers.
We do. Well, you've already shared, Dr. Will, that much of what they're going to see is not a change. When we first shared our return to school, but way back before the start of the school year, we hadn't tried any of these things out yet, so we weren't sure how one-way hallways would work. And I had shared Ben, who also knew that the structure of having a circle would be so beneficial to us in terms of where most of our instructional spaces are located in the circle. So all of those things are going to stay the same, and students have been absolutely fantastic. It's typically staff and faculty that need the reminders about the one-way hallways. So that's only going to become more important that we keep the traffic flow going one direction, which is the good majority of our building for that. But in terms of the purple lettering there, those are what you're going to see as changes that Dr. Will already referred to about what classrooms are going to look like. Right now, much of our furniture has been removed and reutilized and repurposed in other spaces. And now you're going to see that shifting back to the classrooms with 3 feet of distancing and then those barriers going on the desk. We will see some slight room movements, but nothing that will be significant at all on a student's schedule.
Excellent. Thank you. Deanna, I see that 12 feet and it's bothering me, so we're going to keep working on getting band back in.
Band is in purple because it is new. Band just started playing in school, so we put that in purple because it's new.
And you are right. I'm just angry at the 12 feet because I think it should be 6.
We're happy that they're playing.
Me too. Next slide, Kelly. Thank you. So this is where we really need your help. Dr. Leyduk, I don't know if you've already put the survey in the chat, but if you haven't, please do. Folks, where we struggle with social distancing is on school buses. It's not as if we can order more school buses because bus companies don't have extra buses in the middle of the day. So if you're able to continue to transport your children, we greatly appreciate that support because it makes it much more practical for us to actually put one child in a seat. If we can't do that, we'll try to figure out another way to keep kids socially distant. We always put siblings on the same seats if that's possible. But there are a lot of building specific information here that I'm going to rely on Kim, Larry, and Lori to take you through because these are big changes. Most of them are designated in purple.
Sure. So the biggest change that parents are going to notice when they drop their children off is the spots they're going to drop them off in at the start and throughout this point of the school year. Parents have been dropping off to the athletic side of the building with buses and faculty and staff going to the main entrance side of the building, which is on the left as you come up the driveway. Now we're going to see both sides opening up so that we can really keep the traffic moving and hopefully keep Union Avenue free of blockages, but it will take some time to work out. So we're asking also a little grace with this as well and some patience. We have already done planning meetings with the Harrison Police Department about what this can look like. for us to really be as seamless as possible, but it will take some practice for everybody to learn these new routines. Right now, we are looking that on the athletic side, so to the right when you pull in the driveway, we're going to have our seniors and freshmen that are going to get dropped off there. Whereas if you go to the left, it is sophomores and juniors getting dropped off. Now you might say, what if I have multiple grade levels in my car because I have children that are in different grade levels. So perhaps I have a freshman and I have a junior, and they would split. You're going to be able to make that decision. We're just trying to create some balance as the drop off on both sides of the building, with most of our faculty and staff going to the left side and our buses going to the left. And then our two larger grade levels, which are our current freshmen and seniors, as well as all of our student drivers going to the right. We're going to try it out and see how it goes. And if that doesn't work, then we'll come back and relook at that plan and revise it. But that's the plan for right now. And that third bullet, I am especially sad about. Our juniors have done a fantastic job this year. They're new drivers, and we have not had one issue with our juniors parking on campus. And I just want to give a credit to them. And if we could have kept them on campus, we absolutely would have kept them on campus. Unfortunately, when we counted up the number of spots and then the number of spots that are required right now to meet the need for faculty, staff, and seniors with permits, the juniors with permits was exactly almost the actual number of the spots that we had an overage with. So by removing the junior parking, we can accommodate everybody else. So unfortunately, when Wednesday comes on April 7th, we no longer will be able to have juniors parking on campus.
And that is just an artifact of space. I'm so sorry that that had to happen, but that's the only way we can get everybody on the campus. Anything else on that slide?
No, we can go to the next slide.
Before you do, Dr. Laidwood got a great question from a parent. Brian, would you just share that question? Because I think it's worthy of us answering out loud.
Sure. Earlier in your comments, Dr. Will, you mentioned that if people travel over spring break, the recommendation is that they quarantine their children for the 4 days that follow. And the question that came up was, if a parent wants to keep their child home the week after spring break, just as a precaution, even if they haven't traveled, can the child learn virtually? And so the answer in that case would be yes. Would allow that to occur so that kids could learn virtually for that week. We want them to return in person, of course, thereafter. But if that makes parents and kids more comfortable, then we certainly would allow that.
Yep. You know, we struggled with that decision, folks, just to share, Kim, Larry, Lori, Brian, everybody actually on this call struggled with it. We ultimately decided that it was better to have kids in school the week after spring break so that they're not wandering around unsupervised, because we know that when they're in school, we're adhering to the strictest standards of safety, and we want to keep them here as much as we possibly can. So this is our next slide. Obviously, nothing's changed here. We are going to require mask wearing all the time, every day, all day, in almost every place, with the exception of lunch. And Larry, Lori, or Kim, I don't know who wants to add to that.
Sure. The only addition I'd like to make to that is a question that's come up a lot is about what about vaccinated faculty and staff? Vaccinated faculty and staff still will be required to wear face masks in school. That has not changed at all. So we just want to thank everyone, especially our students, for their cooperation with this. It's a long day with them on, and they have done it really seamlessly in terms of making that adjustment.
They really have. I have to say our high school students have been better than a lot of adults I've seen in our community. So we applaud them for their discipline in helping to keep school open. Next slide, please. So this hasn't changed much, but who's going to talk about the daily COVID screening?
Sure, I'm going to introduce Mr. Mastrota, one of our assistant principals at the high school.
Hi, good evening, everybody. As you read through the slide, I just want to highlight a couple of things and draw your attention to it, especially if you've had a child that has not come to school yet. They've been virtual the entire year. It is incredibly important to download the Safe to Speak app. As mom or dad gets the COVID screening questionnaire every morning, the 5 questions, they fill that out. If you have the Safe to Speak app, that automatically then will get to your phone, and before you can enter the building, you have to show the green badge, which you see in the lower right-hand corner of the screen there. And that is critically important because that also allows students that when you do come into the building and you go to the various spots before school begins, which you know are the student union, the small gym, and the HPAC, but now we're adding the large gym as well as another area for students to congregate prior to school. You'll notice on each desk a QR code, and if you've been to school for any amount of time, you've seen the QR codes around, and those are vitally important that where you sit, that you open up the Safe to Speak app and open up the camera within that to shoot the QR code really during any free moment that you are in the building, anywhere where there's a QR code. And the reason for that is that if we have to contact trace, and hopefully we won't have to, but if we do, it allows us to find out and know where students are sitting. It's a very long process that we go through, and I have to give my colleague and good friend Lori Griffo a lot of credit, because sometimes if you don't shoot the QR code, we have to go to the video cameras. And Lori, she's become a master at it, but it does take a very, very long time. And so in order to ensure that, number one, we only want to quarantine those students that we need to quarantine. That's a critical piece of our thinking. But at the same time, we also want to do it in an expedited manner so that we can get the information to the appropriate to Dr. Ladwig, who then moves it on to the Board of Health, and our nurse, Lisa Arlotta, who's done unbelievable work during this pandemic. It allows us to get the process moving faster and getting people notified. So the Safe to Speak app is really the key piece here as a student and a parent to kind of connect with. We'll go to the next slide.
Thank you, Larry. That is so important, and people should do that even if they're virtual, just to say out loud.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Just a reminder. Thanks.
So taking a look at this slide, I think the picture really says 1,000 words in this one. There's our head custodian, Carl Pareto, great head custodian who started this year. And what you see Carl doing is spraying down a disinfectant within the room, EPA approved and safe. It's been happening since the beginning of September. And this happens by our custodians who work at night. We have over 62 rooms that are instructional spaces. That this is on top of all of the normal cleaning that they did prior to the pandemic. And I just want to give a shout out, Dr. Will, to the custodians here at Harrison High School. This is the cleanest, safest building I've ever been in. And when outside or when visitors come, they always comment on the building. And I can't say enough about the custodians and the work that they do day in and day out for both the students and the staff.
I couldn't agree with you more, Larry. You're absolutely right. It's one of the cleanest high schools I've ever seen.
Next slide, Kel. Okay, at this time, I'm going to give it over to my colleague and good friend, Lori Griffo.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So this really nothing much has changed. It's new if you haven't been in the high school that the old water fountains have now been replaced with water bottle fillers throughout the building. And you'll notice throughout the school that there are hand sanitizing stations. Some are in the halls, some are in the student union, and there are also hand sanitizers in each of the classrooms. Again, just to adhere to as many safety precautions as we're able to and follow up based on the guidelines that we have. And students have been using them. Recycling more too has been another benefit. So some good things have come. Next slide.
Okay, I think it's back to me here. So this is a summary of some of the previous slides, just to kind of give a holistic look at it. And we talked about the drop off on both sides, the health screenings. One of the things we'll also do at the end of the day is we're going to try to get our senior drivers off campus a little bit earlier by dismissing them a little bit earlier, because during dismissal, all pickup will be on the athletic side. So we're going to be adding some more cars over there. And so one thing I just kind of want to add to the arrival and drop off. First of all, if you get to the high school and drop your child off before 7:30, you'll get on and get off pretty quickly. If you pick your child up at 2:50, you'll get on and get off pretty quickly. Those other times, obviously 7:30 to 7:45 and 2:25 to 2:45 are prime time on this campus. And we have two goals, as was stated earlier. One is safety, obviously, are the most important one. But the second piece, as Kim alluded to, is we have to keep Union Avenue traffic flowing as much as possible. We want to be good community neighbors, and we know that Union Avenue connects to two expressways. And so certainly in the morning when there's commuter traffic beginning, So the most important thing I can say during arrival and dismissal is just please follow the direction of the security staff. If any of you went to any of the moving up ceremonies or graduations at Wegmans, those are the guys that parked everybody, and just listen to them. Our goal is to bring you all the way onto campus as much as possible, get you off Union Avenue, and then get you back out as quickly as possible. They've done a lot of thinking around it. We put a lot of thought into it. It's not easy. And as Kim and I think Dr. Will alluded to, we've met with Harrison Police Department. We have a great partnership, but it's a lot of work, especially when you consider 95% of the people that leave this building make a left-hand turn and then have to stop 60 feet up the road. So there's a lot going on. HPD is taking control of that. But as I said, this is, and Kim said this earlier, we're going to take a couple weeks to really see how patterns and behaviors emerge. And then if we have to make some changes and tweaks, we're not going to do that without letting you know what we're doing so that you're fully aware of it. But as I said, our goal is safety, but also is to expedite both the drop off and the exit.
And Kelly, before you change that slide, the reason I put that students then proceed to their designated locations in red was to remind myself to commend Kim, Larry, and Lori. Lots of meetings have already occurred with your students.
Right.
So they're very well informed about the changes likely to come. And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Buchman, it's most of the kids have already been informed as to where they will move to when they get after they're either dropped off or get off the bus. Is that right?
Students know that they have choice in locations, and that's the importance of, as Larry shared earlier, of the QR codes, because that tracks their choice, and it also tracks all of those students who are sitting near them. So we not only know exactly what space they went to, we know exactly where they sat in that space on a daily basis.
And you guys have had meetings with all of the students at this point, or not yet?
We did it on their asynchronous day. So we met with Husky and Pride, and we even did a makeup meeting for those who couldn't make either of those times. But we'll be doing some videos for students in addition to that will be shared as part of their first period class morning announcements for any other information that we think is really important to highlight to them.
And before keep your eyes open on the Google Classroom, because we'll be putting a lot of information to the students through that platform as well.
Okay, I want to just run through some questions before we jump to the next slide. Can somebody put the Safe to Speak app link in the chat for Mrs. Gold? And if you need more information, maybe somebody can type a direct answer for her. We will talk about graduation and the prom soon. Mrs. Goldman, be patient. We are going to have graduation and a prom. So we'll leave it at that. We'll tell you more about it as we get there. And the question about what if my child was committed to virtual learning from Q3, can they return at the start of the fourth quarter? Yes, we want your kids back as soon as you can get them back and as soon as we can accommodate them. We want all students to come back. We wouldn't invite you back if we didn't think it was safe. Now, Mrs. Melchevsky with that trigger finger, go ahead.
So I would say in addition to that, Dr. Wool, if also they could reach out to their school counselor or fill out that survey that Dr. Ladwig put in it if they haven't already about their intent to return back.
Good reminder, yep. Tell me about lunch.
Yeah, and lunch. So for lunch, our students are pretty used to what our lunches look like. There'll be some slight changes. Mr. Mastroda already reviewed all of the locations for lunch with the addition of our half-large gym. But they're also going to see a shift in what the seating looks like in those. So students are aware. I know parents haven't been in our buildings, but all of our spaces have been equipped with classroom seating because we were able to remove some seats from classrooms. But now that's all getting shifted back there. So we will have seating available from using some what we kindly refer to as the one-arm bandits at the high school, but there are these flipped desks that come up in addition to some table seating. That won't be our old student union tables because those are round, but we will be utilizing some tables that are more rectangular in shape in some of our spaces. And Mr. Mastroda already talked about our Safe to School app. We are also opening for students our additional sandwich line, and they're going to see what they're going to notice the most is that they're going to see a shift with Pina moving over a little bit to try to get students utilizing both of our sandwich lines to keep the lines down in there. So we encourage students to take advantage of both sandwich lines, not just the one.
That may be the most earth-shattering news of the evening, that Pina's moving from one location to another.
That's true. And we installed another panini maker, so there's news right there.
There we go.
Yes. And one addition our seniors are really probably happy about this is that they are going to be able to permitted to leave campus now during any free period or during their designated lunch period. And they are going to be held to having one passenger in the car, but it doesn't have to be the same passenger each of those different times, but it is held to being one passenger in the car. So those are really the biggest changes that we have at lunch.
Thank you. Next slide. Oh, wait a minute. Food deliveries. That was a question from Mrs. Pearson. They're still on hold.
They are still on hold. That is the last bullet on that slide. If you go back to that slide. So
every time I go to the Harrison Bagel Shop, they ask me when we're going to open it up again. Not yet. Next slide.
So I get to speak again about another benefit that we've had, and that's the amount of time that students have been able to spend outdoors, and they've been enjoying the outdoors on days even that I wouldn't walk outside and want to spend time on that senior patio. But we will continue to use as much of the campus and space as possible. A lot of the PE classes have been outdoors for as much as possible throughout this whole school year, and that will continue. Lunch has expanded to student seating, not only on the senior patio, which we're trying to maintain primarily for seniors, but also on the student union side. And then on some days they have been out on the athletic patio as well, if a teacher doesn't get there first with their classes, because that's another, it's been great to see teachers finding different ways with instruction and still zooming into classes from outdoors. We were worried at first about the Wi-Fi, and teachers have made it work. So all of the social distancing and the mask requirements continue while students are outside. They're really good about it. And we do have people overseeing if they're out there on either of the patios for lunches or their free periods. So just another benefit.
You got some good slides, Mrs. Griffo.
I got lucky.
So when we talk about our 6-day cycle, we have adopted it obviously this year to repeat both of the days. So like, for example, today was a Pride Day 1, tomorrow is going to be a Husky Day 1, but we're not going to see that repeat now that asynchronous is going away. We're going to see what we're most familiar with, which is the regular just 1-day cycle for each of the days in the 6-day cycle. So when students return on Monday, April 5th, they'll be able to close out with their Pride Day 3. And then on Tuesday, April 6th, it will be a Husky Day 3. So then all students will start anew on that Wednesday when they all come back to a Day 4. And then that following day will be a Day 5. That Day 4 will not repeat, is one of the biggest, I think, changes that everybody will get used to with the leaving of asynchronous. And then, of course, we've already mentioned chorus, orchestra, and band. But what we've had over the time that we had those asynchronous days is all of our lessons occurred on those days. So students were virtually zooming in to their band, orchestra, and chorus lessons. And now without having asynchronous days, of course, that can't occur. So those are going to now move to being in person in the same rotation that they have done historically and students are used to in the past. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, I want to give Dr. Ladwig a chance to weigh in here too, because he has been so incredibly supportive and helpful with the principals in establishing surveillance testing, not only at Harrison High School, which Kim will tell you about in a minute, but across the system. So Brian, could you just update the folks on where we are with surveillance testing and what we have seen so far?
Sure. Thanks for those kind words, but really the thanks here go to our school nurses. I can't say enough about their good work at the high school. Lisa Arlotta, as many of you know, has been the person that's been fielding emails and phone calls from parents about symptoms and caring for kids and staff in school, and now testing students and staff as a part of our surveillance testing initiative. So she and Terry Pipitone have just done extraordinary work, and they deserve a lot of thanks from everybody in the school community.
Absolutely.
Now into week 3 of our surveillance testing at the high school. We just did week 3 on Monday this week, yesterday. We've tested just under 180 students and staff, and thankfully can report that all of the results have come back negative. So that's great news. And it supports something that we know about presence of COVID in our schools and in our community. And that is that we've seen over these many months now that when we do find positive results in a student or a staff member, it's almost always attributable to an infection in the household. A family member has it, and then it's not surprising that siblings or children get the virus as well. So thankfully, we're not seeing much, if any, intra-school transmission to the best we can tell. And that's a real credit, I think, to many of the protocols that we have in place. But the surveillance testing will continue through the remainder of this year. We have 82 or 86% of our high school participating, 82%, which is a good level of participation. I'll drop a link into the chat so that if anybody else wants to give consent to have their child participate, the more we have participating, the better. And with the level of participation that we have, we think that we won't likely need to repeat on any group from one week to the next. So if a child or a staff member gets tested, let's say on Monday after the break, it isn't likely that they would need to be retested again, but it's possible. It's a non-invasive test, just if that's not already well known to people. It's not the deep nasal swab, so it's not nearly as unpleasant as what some folks have experienced when they go for a diagnostic test. So we really do encourage everybody's participation, and it really helps us to not only monitor for the presence of COVID, but importantly, it lets us identify people who may be symptomatic and positive, and it lets us help them to isolate before they have much opportunity to develop symptoms and pass it to somebody else. So it's one of our really important mitigation efforts, and we really couldn't do it without the participation of students and staff. And so thanks for giving us consent to do that.
Thank you, Brian. And Brian will drop that link in. And if I could just make one other plea, you know, we're learning so much as we go. Last night we had our middle school meeting, and the question came up, at what point will you be forced to close school again? And the answer to that is, it's not clear to us, but the broader the sampling we can do of kids in our school to show that there's no infection rate in our school, the better. So if you haven't yet given us permission, it is completely non-invasive. Literally, it's a swab inside the tip of each nasal passage, and we know in 15 minutes. Please try to fill out that form tonight. Kim, you want to just talk about how it happens at the high school?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mastrota, who's
Fine.
done the oversight around this at the high school.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So, you know, once we get the list from Dr. Ladwig, you know, it comes on a first come, first serve basis. When your child walks in, they're given a number so that we keep order. I would say that the nasal swab test, we have 2 nurses. We have another nurse that comes in on Monday so that we can expedite the process. I would say 60 to 90 seconds that your child is there just getting set and getting the nasal swab. And then they come and they sit back down in the gymnasium in our chairs. They're given a time by the nurse to walk to a private area in the locker room where they meet Mrs. Pipitone, who reveals their result to them. And then if it's negative, and as Brian said, we're very fortunate, it's been negative since we've started this, they go right to class and go on with their day. And so I would say in the 3 opportunities we've given, between 8:30, which is kind of right at the end of first period, to about 8:45, you know, we do have some students who forget that they have to come down. We got to kind of grab them to make sure we get our sample size. But it is a fairly smooth process, and you know, it's really giving us some good data about what's happening in our school and our school community. So appreciate everybody who's opted into that.
Thank you, Larry. And you will be notified in advance. And Kim, there's a question that we knew was going to come up about when the 3rd quarter ends, the actual date. Can you remind people of what date that is?
Sure, I'm looking in my notes right now for the date because I put it in. I want to say it is, hold on, I got it right here. How's that? It is April 16th, and that would mean the 4th quarter would start on Monday the 19th.
So that was a question that also came up last night, and Mr. Freed inadvertently answered it incorrectly. So now you've heard the actual answers, April 16th. Okay, thank you, everybody. Next slide. So Kim's going to tell you about all of the things that the school has been doing before your kids have returned back on April 7th to get them ready for this return. I don't know, is it you, Ms. Buckham, or are you sharing it with others?
It's actually me. So,
all right.
Yes, as we've mentioned already, we have had student meetings with our Husky group, with our Pride group, and then a makeup group. We have reviewed safety protocols with the students. There's not a lot of shifts or adjustments to those. Lunches will be, to answer a question that had come up, still be 6 feet of social distance, which is why we had to open some additional spaces to have lunch in. And students are pretty familiar with everything. And we also wanted to remind them of some of the supports that are out there and available to them that they can access at any time. What we're going to do is on that Monday and Tuesday, when teachers are back, any videos that we need to put out or links to students to be able to share additional information. For instance, our student advisory board is working on a video right now to instruct students on how to use the QR codes. So that'll all occur across Monday and Tuesday, and really they'll have the opportunity to close out those asynchronous days with students and also just close out what those hybrid groups look like to unify everybody when they come together as a group on Wednesday. So that is the plan as things stand.
Thank you. Another question in the chat. The reason Brian is typing the answer, but we use the tests that are provided to us by the state of New York because they're provided for free. And we don't use the saliva test because they're not provided for free. The Binex test is what the state gives us, and we would not recommend that you use the Binex tests to determine definitively whether or not you have COVID. Even if you get a positive, we would send you off to get a PCR. These are for surveillance testing purposes primarily. Next slide, please, Kelly. So I'm really excited to hear about this because as I reminded you at the beginning, and as I look at our panelists, I see we have some of our guidance counselors here tonight. We have Mrs. McCarthy, our social worker. We have some of our school psychologists here. Our school is always preparing for the needs of your kids, but I think you're going to hear how we do it in a targeted way. I think, Mrs. Melchevsky, are you on?
I am. Thank you, Dr. Wool. It's really my pleasure to introduce this portion of the presentation this evening because the social emotional learning, as Dr. Wool outlined earlier in the presentation, really is one of our greatest priorities as students transition back in. Even the previous slide that Ms. Buckham was speaking to was describing this transition that students are experiencing. And we aren't just turning on the lights, as Dr. Wool mentioned. We are being very thoughtful every step of the way about how students will re-enter the building, even if they've already been here with us, because we recognize that it will be new to them in many ways. And we're being really thoughtful about our current practices and how those need to be adjusted and reconsidered to be responsive to all students. This pyramid outlines our district-wide approach to social and emotional learning, and I will walk you through some of the general pieces of this, but the reality is there are a lot of stakeholders involved in this work at the high school. As Lou mentioned, there are teachers, school counselors, the mental health team of school psychologists and social workers are all involved deeply in this work. The bottom two tiers here represent our everyday social emotional learning. It's the type of social emotional learning that all students will experience in the supportive environments that we offer, the thoughtful supports that are available. Some examples listed here are our school counseling department. Students know and families know, hopefully on this call, that they can access their school counselor at any time with any need they might have, always, but particularly during this transition. Those nurturing and responsive relationships as well through the robust progress monitoring system and thoughtful classroom curriculum we'll discuss even further. The top two tiers are obviously not for every student, but they're more targeted, they're more intensive. We know that every child has experienced the pandemic differently. Some students have adjusted and responded quite well, and others have really suffered. The reality is we will monitor all students and we're ready to meet them where we are. Our social emotional learning curriculum, just like any classroom curriculum, is highly differentiated, highly individualized, and will definitely provide whatever the appropriate supports are in place. The next several slides will go through all of these elements in detail, and we'll also celebrate some of the great work and some of the great SEL learning that students have participated in throughout the pandemic. So to kick this off, I would like to introduce our MYP coordinator and assistant principal at LMK, Mrs. Jen Egan.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, everyone. I'm so proud to be the MYP coordinator and be a part of the great work that has gone on and continues to go on at Harrison High School in both IB programs that exist there. Harrison High School houses both the middle years program in grades 9 and 10 and the diploma program in grades 11 and 12. And the IB mission statement that's pictured here really encompasses both programs and naturally creates the foundation for the social and emotional learning that Ms. Melchevsky was just mentioning. Both IB programs at the high school value students for their social, emotional, creative, and academic qualities and devote attention to developing social and emotional competencies such as self-discovery and empathy that will serve them beyond the scope of their years in school. And if you just take a look at the mission statement of some of the words that are bolded, that really gets at the heart of that work, particularly my favorite part of the IB mission statement, which is that last line that students become lifelong learners who understand that other people with their differences can also be right.
Can we
So
just pause there, Jen? Because I think you make such a powerful point. And it came up at the Parsons meeting, it came up at the Purchase meeting, it came up a little bit last night at the Lewis M. Klein Middle School meeting. You know, we are incredibly attuned, I think, to the diverse world that we live in. And the purpose of our adoption of the International Baccalaureate program and the middle years program, and finally in this year's budget, the primary years program, is because we think the way we build a better world is by making people more aware of who they are and how they can relate to people that are not like them, to develop deep understanding and respect for one another. So we don't view multiculturalism as an event or a series of events. We're trying to deeply embed our global perspective and the way in which kids can approach these complex issues about race and culture and ethnicity and difference and mutual respect is by engaging them in their own learning to become reflective thinkers. And Jen has done a magnificent job of stewarding the implementation of the IB middle years program, which we will be a full IB middle years program come June 1st. So congratulations to the team. We did that during the pandemic. But this is such a powerful and important part of who we are that I just wanted to pause and say we should all be grateful that we have been on this path now since 1999. And you'll learn later Michael Greenfield's great stewardship of putting the diploma program in place. But we have very high participation level. And now that we have the middle years program, every child 6 to 10 gets to participate. And in the coming years, every child K through 10 will get to participate. So good job. Very important slide. Thank you very much for mentioning all that, Jen.
Sure, no problem. And just to go along, as we move on to the next slide, a way that we can really see that the IB programs are embedded in our schools, and I'm excited to say will be embedded in our elementary schools soon as well, is that graphic of the IB learner profile. It's such a recognizable graphic now. It's all throughout the hallways and classrooms in Harrison High School, also Lewis M. Klein Middle School. And this graphic that holds these learner profile attributes really shows how the IB program naturally lends itself to support social and emotional learning. These traits have been identified by the IB organization as goals for students to develop as they are going through, whether it's the middle years program or the diploma program. And they're traits that go beyond academic success. We make it a point to explicitly discuss what these traits mean with our students in both programs, so that way they can reflect on their own personal growth as they strive to develop all of these attributes. They're often a frame for discussion with students as they prepare for upcoming challenges or as they face unknown situations. And I'm really proud to say that it truly is a common language across all grade levels. As we think about other ways that IB programs support social and emotional learning, The middle years program in particular highlights something that's called approaches to learning skills. These skills are organized into 5 categories you can see depicted in the lower left quadrant of this slide. Those categories are thinking, social, communication, self-management, and research. And when planning units, teachers think about which approaches to learning skills students need in order to be successful. So in addition to learning content, students are also learning how to develop important skills such as managing emotions, setting goals and taking steps towards achieving them, thinking through situations from multiple perspectives, and managing different social interactions. So they're skills that students carry with them as they exit the middle years program and enter the diploma program. So they not only support social and emotional learning, I would say that they really enhance it. And all of the social and emotional learning components that are embedded within the IB program prepare students to engage in important work outside of the classroom as well. And on that note, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague to speak a little more about this, Ms. Lori Griffo.
Hey, Jen, before you jump and before Lori jumps in, because she's going to give real life examples. When we were reviewing this, folks, and we do rehearse, we were looking at this slide and we were all struck by the way those skills, those approaches to learning are going to serve your kids so well now as they come back to school and have to sort of reorient themselves to this world. Imagine how critical their social skills are going to be, their ability to communicate and to advocate for themselves. And so we felt very proud that in many respects, we have been preparing your children all along for dealing with these very difficult experiences. And Lori's going to tell us some of the ways that our kids already have voice and self-expression.
Thank you, Lou. Yeah, it's, since we were speaking to parents when students were in 8th grade and coming to the high school, we speak about opportunities for students to find their passion and find their voice. I always hear Larry saying, by the time they walk across the stage at graduation, we want your students to be advocating for themselves. We want them to be speaking up. And that's on a daily, a more general basis, but there are so many opportunities at the high school for kids to find a club or find a group in which they can do it in a more collective environment. And we have some great advocacy within that, outside of the classroom as well as within. I'd like to share a couple quick examples, if I may. I kind of put a couple different visuals up there. We have a GSA club as well as Friends of Rachel, who, those 2 clubs really work to advocate, to educate students in very different areas. GSA will provide us with education around different topics, terminology, vocabulary, and they will also raise awareness through a day of remembrance. And that was where the candle vigils came from, one of their slides. And then we have Friends of Rachel, who will find different causes, and once a month, sometimes we'll be asked to wear a different color for that month to just kind of have students think about different needs throughout society. As you can see from our Husky Herald, we have writers who, they're not afraid, they don't shy away from taking on controversial issues or things that are happening in the news or within Harrison culture. And I needed to include this picture of these two seniors that this year, when we discussed opening up school and that students weren't going to have their leave privileges at the start.
That was great.
Lou was invited to the meeting. They put together a PowerPoint. They went through research and their reason why this wasn't very different. They brought in their senior class officers. It was such a collaborative moment. It was well thought out. And what was one of the proudest moments was that our students know that they can come and speak to us, that there are adults in the building that are going to listen, and they, eventually they did get to get their leave right for one period. We kind of made some compromises, but it was such a great story for what it means to have voice and advocate for something that you believe in. And then that brings me also to our student advisory board. Our student advisory board really is the liaison. They work between the students and the administration, and they really do partner with us. And last year they began hosting open forums for students to be able to come and share their thinking about different issues. And for this year, their last open forum was one discussing virtual and hybrid learning. And there's protocols that are in place. They do such a great job. They facilitate it all. This year, they needed to do it in a virtual world with breakout rooms and facilitators in each room. It was really very well done. And as a result, they collected the information that students shared through that forum. They put it together. They presented it in a slideshow. They came back and presented it to us. They presented it recently with the directors to then be able to share with teachers as well for what things were working for students really well, what things, maybe could be improved upon or changed, or some differences. It was amazing. They're really, the partnerships between students and adults have been, they continue to grow and build. And then again, we have the student self-expression. So that happens, of course, you'll think, well, in the fine and performing arts, you see our dance students here and a piece of artwork that is on display now, which is just, it's in the building. It's fascinating the way it was done with the lines are actually made out of string and all different mediums. And what has been really wonderful about this is that through all of this, I have to, really highlight our teachers and really thinking differently about how to continue to provide these opportunities for our students in a virtual way. The dance performance shown here, that was done last spring, and it was unbelievable to be able to see our kids performing again when we were all behind our computers. And the Imagine magazine, the literary magazine, which is a place where students can express themselves in writing. They have a section that is in artistic work as well. So it's all different kinds of mediums. It's not just a literary magazine that's just writing anymore, just poetry or short stories, but they're incorporating all different kinds of mediums. And last year it went virtual since we weren't able to have copies. So it's exciting work that our students continue to do along with their advisors and teachers who continue to rethink how to have that continue.
Thank you for closing on recognizing the advisors. I just want to highlight the Husky Herald. What makes it important to me is that when I look at the kids that are on the staff, they represent all perspectives of the political spectrum. Mr. Glauber has done a really fine job of making sure that newspaper is reflective of multiple perspectives and voices. And all of our work is designed to help kids figure out who they are and to share who they are with others. That doesn't mean everybody's always going to have the same perspective or viewpoint. The idea, though, to go back to the most important slide here, is that if we're going to build a better world, then we need to learn to hear one another and how to express things that we may disagree on respectfully and maybe grow and learn from one another. And that's where social emotional learning happens every day in Harrison High School. If you ask me what I'm most proud of about our faculty, is that they've created a culture where that can happen. So thank you, Lori.
You're welcome. And to go transition into the next slide, with our co-curriculars, Lou, I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, but this year we have a new club. It started last year, towards the end of the year, I Am Harrison. And the group this year came and presented an idea to us in which they are interviewing different members of the Harrison community, and they're highlighting a lot about who they are. It kind of goes exactly with what you were just saying, Lou, and it's called the I Am Harrison United Profiles, and that will be released soon. We have the first round completed, but again, it highlights students' backgrounds, their cultures, things that their, favorite memories. I can't wait to see it, and I can't wait to share it out. But again, really connected to everything we've been talking about tonight and other opportunities for students to share who they are.
That's fantastic. And I look at the variety of places your kids can find to express themselves as human beings. That's what we should all be proud of. And I know our school board is proud of that. All right.
One of the other things we wanted to do on this slide is to highlight, there's no way we can't not mention some of our more competitive clubs when we talk about clubs. So we have thrived in this virtual environment this year with those clubs, those being Debate, DECA, Model Congress. So I just want to give a few of those highlights for those who are not able to attend our PTA meetings, so you can really see what is going on for students competitively in this environment. So our debate season at Harrison High School has really been one of the most successful we've ever had. Harrison's varsity Lincoln Douglas debaters have won 15 tournaments this year, including the national championship at Harvard University, the Glenbrooks in Illinois, Apple Valley in Minnesota. And when I say in these places, they're virtual. That's where they're being hosted from. For Apple Valley, they were champions in both varsity and JV. Princeton University, Yale University, Harrison debaters have earned a record 27 qualifying bids to the Tournament of Champions, qualified 9 students to the National Debate Coaches Association National Championship, 4 students to the National Catholic Forensic League's National Championship, 2 students to the National Speech and Debate Association's National Championship, and 10 students to the New York State Forensic League's State Championship. So that gives Harrison debaters the ranking of being number 1, number 5, number 6, number 15, and number 20 nationally, which is unbelievable. And for our state recognition, they take and swipe spots 1 through 5, along with 7, 9, and 10 in New York State. So congratulations to debate. For our DECA, 20 actually made and competed at the state competition. 6 were in the top 10 of their respective event, and an additional 5 students were in the top 4, and those 4 students are now competing at the national competition, which will be throughout the month of April, because that's also virtual. Model Congress, our students attended some of our most prestigious tournaments. We actually were able to do more in this environment. Those were Princeton, Yale, Harvard, and Columbia, and the team has collectively won 12 Best Delegates, 5 Best Legislation Awards, and 15 honorable mentions. And then I can't not mention in this, it's not a co-curricular, it is a curricular because it's actually a course that we offer here at Harrison High School, and that's science research. So I just want to mention their success this year as well. We've had 2 Regeneron winners. We've had students that have placed in many of their competitions. We just heard from NYSEF this morning. We have 3 students that are advancing to the lightning round there. And in addition, WESF is actually having their award ceremony right now as we are having this webinar. So congratulations to all those teams.
And that was, we can't help but brag a little bit. I know that I see in the comment that people are still talking about reopening. This is about reopening because what we're sharing with you is what's been going on. And now all of these things are going to exist in an amplified way. So I'm very proud of what we've accomplished here. Mr. Herzig, they're trying to recruit him, I think, away from us. So we're not letting him go anywhere because he's apparently dominating the universe in debate. Next slide, please. Thank you, Kim. We also have done a tremendous amount of work in this in almost an impossible environment. I don't even know how we've managed to pull this off, but we continue to have a profoundly successful athletic program. And all of that is advancing and enhanced right now because kids are back. Mr. Galano, you're on.
Thanks, Lou. And I want to thank you and the Central Administration and the Board of Ed. We were kind of the lighthouse district on getting sports up and going in schools. I don't know if you guys were on for the middle school one last night, but we were one of the only schools, if not the only school in the section to offer any sort of organized activities around athletics at the middle school level when Section 1 deemed that the seasons were canceled. So, immediately I went to Lou and the board and, their answers were always, can we do it safely? We had a plan in place and we implemented it. So I want to thank the board and you, Lou, for that support, and my colleagues, because I've talked to other athletic directors and again, many came to me to see what we were doing, how we were doing it, how do we get it approved, what were our protocols? And that says a lot about the district and the community. So I do appreciate that. And for me, pictures and for those that know me, the kids are what keep me going. I think that's what keeps everyone going on this panel. But for me, I needed pictures. Pictures to me explain everything. So one of the things we were excited about were that we kept some of the successes that we've previously had. So we had senior nights where we were able to recognize our senior athletes. We still are, and I'll on the next slide talk about all of our achievements, and I'll brag a little bit. But all of this was done during a period of time where many kids were not in school, or they came in and out. And kids came every single day to practice, to compete. And a lot of times they did not know if there was going to be tomorrow or the next day. And another group I would like to thank and to shout out, and I think one of the highlights of this is, I think this pandemic has reset our vision of athletics. Even from a parent perspective, I have been doing this for a pretty long time now. And unfortunately, my job is usually to solve problems and to take the brunt of anger. But during this pandemic and the athletic part of it, the parents have been so supportive and thankful for what these coaches have been doing. These coaches are doing work that, just like the teachers are, that are day and night, through the night. I'm on the phone with some of them early in the morning, late at night. Some of them, have young kids. So kudos to the parents, because without your support, none of this is possible, but also to our coaches and our teachers and obviously our student athletes. The picture in the middle is our fitness center. I want to thank the Harrison Educational Foundation. They provided us a grant that provided abundance of equipment. And not only was it an upgrade of equipment, but it also provided us the ability to be flexible with where to put the equipment. So for example, we're getting rowers that are mobile, so we can move them into other locations, such as outside of the gym, so we can get more kids involved. Obviously, with the restrictions we have, we needed to get creative with the equipment. So I really do thank them. And that was open from the earliest day that we could. And again, that says a lot about our district. And this is a picture of some kids working out in a safe environment. And a shout out to Coach Fish, who's our phys ed teacher in the middle and high school, but also he has reimagined our fitness center. And I can tell you, from kids to parents to coaches, it has changed not only our facility, but also the results that we are seeing. And it's a direct correlation to that. So again, we appreciate the support from Central and ULU and the building administration, but also people that may help make it happen. So we thank that. Kelly, I think we can go to the next one. And I felt a little left out. People were bragging. So this slide, obviously, what's most important to us is athletics is a connection for all kids. We've seen actually an increase in numbers where we've had to make cohorts to be able to, for instance, indoor track. We had kids coming on certain days at certain times. So the coaches stayed for, say 4 hours with 4 different cohorts. But we're seeing an increase because obviously kids are needing to be engaged and have some connection to the school. So we're really proud of that. And that is what, athletics are for. It's an extension of what's going on in the classroom. So every slide that's on this presentation is just an extension of athletics as well. But to brag a little bit, during this, and I think Coach Zanat said it perfectly, during the pandemic, we have 6 Division I student athletes signing to go on to the next level. That is unheard of, usually in a public school in a general year, let alone during a pandemic. We have over 7 actually, because more are coming in as I speak, Division II and III student athletes going to play at the next level. And what that says is obviously the rigor of what we're doing and the successes that the kids are having, the coaches and the programs are having. We are in a very good place, even though we are coming out of a very bad pandemic in the athletic world. We've also had 27 all-league, 7 all-section, 5 all-county. And these are all obviously end results from the fall and winter. But it just highlights the incredible work. And I can't go without thanking, again, the coaches, but also everyone from the nurse to getting the kids cleared, Lisa Arlotta, to my security staff. Mike Kaminsky's in my office almost every day. How can we get kids, moving in a safe and happy way? There's a lot of people to thank out there, but this is all the work that goes into it. I've stayed up countless nights, ensuring that the safety is paramount of what we're doing, and it's shown. We have not had, just like in inside of school, we're not having any rates of COVID being spread within the athletic program. Anytime it comes, it's because it's from the outside in. We actually had 2 athletes compete in a national tournament for track and field, and they both were podium finishers, which means they finished 1 through 5 in their heat. We also had a Super 11 recipient, which is a prestigious football award given each year to the top 11 players in this entire Section 1. That includes, Putnam and Rockland. So, and we are also, again, I've been here for, I think, 5 years. I'm losing count, but each year we are recognized and continue to be recognized as a Scholar Athlete Team School of Distinction, which means our kids' overall average is over 90% for over 90% of our teams. And that's a powerful statement that we are having that much academic success. Obviously, you're going to hear more about that on the other side of this slide, but also if you read, the athletic success, we are really pushing out some true student athletes, and I'm very proud of, what we've been able to accomplish. Again, I get thank yous to me this year, but it's a huge thanks to, it's not me, it's my staff, it's the coaches, it's the security, it's, the central administration. So I want to thank everyone else for all they're doing. And without further ado,
Chris, before you hand it to Kelly, I just want to take a pause here. Folks, we're going to take our time because there's a lot to know. We're going to answer everybody's question because it's important that everybody's question get answered. I'm monitoring everything, so we will get to you. But let me explain to you why celebrating what we're doing right now is important. Because if folks don't behave thoughtfully, it can all be taken away. I watched our varsity boys basketball team, unfortunately, lose significant opportunity because they were exposed and had to go into quarantine. So all of this effort on the part of our coaches, on the part of our teachers, on your part, is essential and succeeds when we work together, and it all goes away when we don't. So we're bringing all of our kids back. So we're reminding you of what we've been able to do in the hybrid environment. I'm going to say this out loud. It's going to be harder to do it with all of our kids present. It's going to be more fulfilling, and we can do it, but it's important that we understand the significance of what we've achieved. And in order to move forward, we need everybody's focus. There is a question in here that has some folks. Let me answer a couple before we go too much further. I'm going to speak now for my faculty, who I think is the finest faculty ever assembled in any high school. And I say that because I've been here long enough to hire almost all of them. I'm not worried about them overburdening your kids with homework because they're smart, they're attentive, they're really fine-tuned to where your kids are, and you're going to hear more about how we know where your kids are when we get to the academic component. And the other question, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm equally committed to athletics as I am to fine and performing arts. Stephanie Goldman is the acting fine and performing arts director. She's had a prominent role in fine and performing arts for a very long time, and she's going to continue to do that role until we find a permanent replacement. And as soon as we can get kids back on the stage, back in the band, that we will do it. We are pushing as hard as we can to get the regulations changed so that we can do more for those kids. Now, without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce Kelly Melchevsky, because what's gone on in our guidance department, what our kids have achieved this year is extraordinary.
Thank you, Dr. Wool, and thank you, Chris. And I'm excited to share this slide with athletics. So while not always immediate obvious in terms of the connection between athletics and guidance, I think the way in which Chris described his scholar athletes and their post-secondary opportunities just shows that natural connection between the two departments. And certainly the school counselors play a huge role in all of those scholar achievements and post-secondary plans and successes that all of our athletes are experiencing. But it's not only about the athletes, so it's all students. There are literally hundreds of points of pride and success stories connected to academics. And in particular, we're highlighting on this slide college admissions. So in the pandemic, we have not only adapted as a school counseling department, but really grown. I have been amazed by the expertise, adaptability, flexibility of our high school counselors and what they've been able to accomplish with students and families. Just some quick highlights are we've had more college visits this year than ever before. There were virtual college visits held in our beautiful guidance classroom where students would attend and the representative would be on the screen and students had great access to all of their schools. Additionally, we've grown. So we have now offered 2 school day SATs where students have had the opportunity to take the SAT in-house in a setting that is comfortable and familiar to them, particularly during a pandemic, as well as we will have 2 sittings of the ACT during the school day. We've hosted virtual financial aid nights and senior nights and junior nights and FAFSA completion nights. And the point is that we have hit the ground running. And let's not forget that this is built into that social emotional learning section. All of this is rooted in that everyday social emotional learning. So while some of it can feel technical around a common application or a college admissions process, it's all about the well-being, mental health of children. So the other fun thing that we've been able to do and school counselors have been really creative around is personalizing the work. So we've had these amazing Zoom workshops that are incredibly personalized and individualized based on college admissions decisions in real time. So recently counselors offered the how and why of demonstrated interest, which is a brand new event this year. So again, more access to students and families and more personalized approaches to the work. It's also a celebration to mention that our guidance events have been recorded. They're shared on the website. They're translated into other languages. So in terms of access, we feel like we've been able to reach more students and families than ever. I also just wanted to mention our National Merit Scholarship Program. So these are students that we celebrate every year, and that's a great picture of them below. So students are awarded for how they perform on the PSAT their junior year, and that's a great picture. And I did have to mention that all of the students' thumbs up are up in the guidance slide. So we have a good time in guidance, and I think it's just a credit to, again, the social and emotional learning and well-being of our students. And that's Mrs. Hay, and down in that picture, I have to acknowledge her as well since she's on the call.
Thank you, Kelly. I think it goes back to me, but can you go to the next slide, please? So obviously the other half of my job that many people don't know about, I'm in charge of the physical education and health department. And, as a department, a whole department, K through 12, I think we have one of the best staffs around, if not anywhere. But particularly at the high school, I think these teachers truly understand what it means to be, a role model, a teacher, a support for your children. And many of your kids, maybe you know it, maybe you don't, go to your PE or health teachers with sometimes complex issues or something that they're going through. And obviously now coming back from a pandemic, it's now more than ever more important for us to be cued into their social and emotional, well-being. So obviously movement is very important. To me, it's the most important thing we need to be doing. But coming after a pandemic, it is so important to have activity. So we're really going to emphasize movement, the importance of it, getting outside, getting fresh air, moving around, and all the benefits that come from that, and learning skills. What I'm also very proud of is our physical education teachers have partnered with the school counselors and also the school psychologists. We had a joint professional development period with the 3 groups, which has never been done before. And I would confidently say does not happen anywhere else. And what we're doing is having a targeted approach to building groups to have awareness, a targeted approach to help kids that are coming back, and also the kids that are staying fully virtual, as we are concerned for them as well. But basically, it's a approach that is a unified approach with these 3 groups. And why we chose phys ed and health. Phys ed teachers get to see every kid every other day, and we also obviously see the importance of physical education and health. And prior to a pandemic, mental health was on the forefront of our department, and now obviously post-pandemic or during the pandemic, we take pride in being a leader within the school around the mental health. So we see ourselves as part of the mental health team as well. And even today I was on the phone with one of our school psychologists, how to help a child that is navigating a very tough situation. And we had some tough conversations. We brainstormed, and we got a coach involved. We got a PE teacher involved. So again, this is just another safety net or support that we have in place for kids that are coming back, and will continue to. And many times, maybe the child, gets back and transitions fine. Some may come back and then have a lull. So we're going to be constantly monitoring. And shout out to my department for all they do. And obviously, we're doing this as well without small gym all year, and the big gym being taken in and out, and they're being incredibly flexible, but also still pushing a high quality PE program. So I'd like to thank them as well.
Well, Chris, I want to thank you because the kind of innovation going on in our physical education program, and folks, this is about bringing your kids back. Understand what we're doing here, what is really happening, and I can't thank the physical education teachers enough for vesting in the way they have in the social and emotional well-being of kids. And as you're going to learn, they've become incredible partners to our support staff. Our psychologists, counselors are now see the PE department as an extension of how to keep kids mentally healthy. This is just an incredible accomplishment. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of them. And the fact that this relationship was organic and motivated by the commitment of teachers to kids should be something we're all proud of, because I know I am.
Yeah, thank you. Without further ado, I'm going to be quiet now, but I'm going to introduce the Secondary Supervisor of Special Education, and Tonya Samayo.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Galano. I am very happy to be here this evening to talk more about the targeted social emotional support that we have had in our district, and we continue, and it has shifted along the way depending on where the student needs are. Dr. Will stated earlier in the evening that there's a continuum of need, and Mrs. Melchevsky showed us on the slide with the pyramid that is the continuum. We start at the bottom, supporting all of our students with universal interventions and universal supports. And as we move up the pyramid, we get to varying needs of students that need a little bit more support. So I do want to, shout out and just talk about how proud we are of our mental health team at the high school. We have 4 school psychologists, Dr. Abbott, Dr. Francis, Dr. Ribner, and Dr. Singer, in addition to a student assistance counselor, Mrs. Dana McCarthy. They are all very highly skilled in evidence-based approaches, and one of those approaches is DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. And this is work that they have done over the last several years, providing targeted group counseling support. And DBT is a skills-based approach that focuses on these 4 tenets: mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness. These are equipping students with practical skills that I myself use every day. We are very excited that we've been able to partner up with the Phys Ed department as well as the school counselors, as Mr. Galano just shared, in order to provide more universal access to the DBT skills. So we want to make sure that we are reaching more students with these skills to help with their outcomes in school, to help them be successful and function within the classroom and beyond the classroom. In addition to that, I just want to say that our school psychologists continue to collaborate, and they consult with the faculty, with school counselors, with administrators and families, and they're very responsive to where the student needs lie. It could be that they're providing behavioral strategies or instructional strategies to support within the classroom, or they're meeting with groups of students or individual counseling to focus on things such as social skills, coping skills, executive functioning skills. And even within that, I want to acknowledge that it has shifted this year, and it's shifted at different points of the year. They've had to pivot as necessary based on the way that students are experiencing what is currently happening. And so we're very excited to welcome the students back. We are certainly aware that students will adjust differently, and I believe that they are absolutely ready and able to handle all the student needs and concerns once we reintegrate into the building. And so that's a little bit about our social emotional support at the high school. And I will turn it over to Stephanie Goldman right now to talk about theater.
So continue to think about the social emotional growth of our students specific to the arts. The Fine and Performing Arts in Harrison continue to provide experience that helps students develop self-management and self-discipline skills, along with interpersonal and relationship skills and self-expressive skills. Sorry for my dog behind me. Students have been working with clubs such as Dance Connections, Symphonic Winds, Husky Harmonics, Footlight Players, Art Club, and String Ensemble, just to name a few. And they've been taking place this entire school year, where students have been working together in very different ways, and teachers have been able to provide feedback to students as well to help them build these skills. We've had virtual performances from Symphonic Winds and String Ensemble, which sounded beautiful hearing everybody playing together. We also had, just this past Friday, the IB Virtual Art Exhibit, which took place, and you can find still on our webpage in the news feed, as well as on our YouTube channel. The Harrison Playhouse completed their fall production earlier in the year and are currently working on their virtual spring production, which is She Kills Monsters. And the Harrison Footlight Players have been in rehearsal for their virtual musical, Theory of Relativity. And we still have our district-wide virtual art show coming up in May. While in school, when they're in their courses, those will all be continuing on a normal schedule. And as Ms. Buchema said earlier, chorus, band, and orchestra will all be playing in person, and lessons will take place in person as well. Singing and dance will be 12 feet apart. Orchestra and percussion will be 6 feet apart. And band lessons, which are taking place, will be 12 feet apart as well. Performer masks and bell covers have been purchased for all students who will be playing any instruments that air is coming out of. So whether it's an artistic performance or a performance of the arts in a different way, these clubs and these courses have really helped to provide positive impact on the social, emotional, and cognitive development of our students.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next slide, please. So this is the pivot point for us, ladies and gentlemen. I want to just take a minute to recognize we have 4 trustees on tonight, and I want to acknowledge their commitment, but also they have children in our high school, seniors who have experienced what many seniors have. And this is my probably the saddest part of my job this year is thinking about everything that the current senior class has lost, because these are kids that started their junior year in the pandemic, and they have had so much taken from them. You know, I have my backdrop behind me right now is a lighthouse, because it's been really dark and difficult for us to navigate these waters for so long, not knowing where we were going to land and not understanding fully what kids we're going to be able to get back. Well, I'm here to tell you that we're going to do everything possible to have a bright new day for your kids, and especially for our seniors. But in order to do that, we need to know where we are. And we have been planning for this moment from the day we closed. We have watched everything. Your kids are not coming back to a place that doesn't know where they are. We do know where we're going. We do have a really thoughtful plan. I've been reading a lot of research, and many school districts are floundering to try to figure out, where are the kids? Well, we know where they are socially and emotionally. I know our guidance counselors have stayed connected to your kids. I know our school psychologists have been monitoring those kids that are struggling. And I also know that every faculty member has been working to be ready to pivot to this moment in time. Now you're going to hear a couple of things about what the organization's been doing that you don't see, that you're not aware of, because we've been monitoring your kids since the pandemic. We knew that they were going to come back. We knew that they were going to struggle, and we needed a way to figure out where to begin this journey. I hope when you're finished with this part of the presentation, you understand that not only do we understand what your children have lost, we're going to do everything we possibly can to bring them right back to where they need to be. We're using this return. One of the questions in the chat was, why are you bringing them back now? Because every day that we have them back is a day that we get closer to making them whole. We're going to use the rest of this year to figure out how to get them ready for the summer. And the summer is going to be another springboard for them to get them ready for September. And for our seniors, we're going to find a way to make sure every experience that those kids have lost is regained to the extent we can bring it back. So we know where we're going. Next slide. I want to introduce my colleague and my good friend, Mr. Greenfield, who has been working tirelessly to make sure that we were ready for this moment in time. Michael, you want to explain to folks what's on the screen?
Thank you, Lou. And I'm going to be joined by, if you remember from about an hour and a half ago when my colleagues were introduced, the Director of English Language Arts, Jamie Cantor, Miss Veronica D'Andrea, who's the Director of Mathematics, and the Director of Social Studies, Miss Marlene Colon, will be joining me in this part of the presentation. As Lou pointed out, we have been planning. We've always planned carefully, and we've taken advantage of that planning to take a systematic, systemic, and of course personalized approach to making sure we know where your students are as they return. And we see it as a three-phase process. Phase one is the springboard, and that's the spring. Every day, as Lou pointed out, that we have your child, your young adult, in our classrooms with our teachers is a day that we, there goes my light. It's a day that we can build upon their readiness that they've gained through the hybrid learning model. And so we are excited to have every student back, and we know we'll take advantage of that time together. But we are looking ahead to the fall, and we know that it's been a challenge. There's a great deal of curriculum. We have an incredibly rigorous IB diploma program. We have an incredibly rigorous middle years program, and we hold in great respect the academic achievement of students and recognize that the stakes are really high. But our teachers are experts. They have been expertly trained externally, and they continue to be trained internally. So what we're building is a summer program that will build on April, May, and June's continued development of academic skills. We are looking at various ways to accelerate and essentialized. We've talked about essentialized curriculum. We've identified the most important content and skills necessary to be successful, and we've tried to emphasize those in our curriculum, and you'll hear evidence of that as we move forward. We've also found that during the hybrid learning experience, students have achieved at levels that were both expected and unexpected. Many have thrived, and we know that every child learns differently and has experienced this hybrid learning experience differently. And so we're both prepared to accelerate students who are coming back really ready to go. We're prepared to support students who are coming back really at the level we would expect if this had been a traditional year. And we are also prepared to support students who need more support during this next few months. The summer will be an opportunity to additionally create another level of spring in the board, so to speak. We're looking at programs as we pivoted last summer. We built programs that expanded our academic summer high school to a large number of enrichment modules that included humanities enrichment, STEM enrichment. These modules over 2 weeks time last year were found to be really successful, high engagement, and intense focus on skill development. And we see this being a summer program approach that we're going to build this year as well and expand to students so that more students can take advantage of the opportunity for both intervention, academic skill development, and enrichment. And all of this is, of course, in support of the anticipation of a return in September, which we're looking at carefully. We know that students, for example, in a 2-year course in an IB course, going into their senior year, may need certain concepts and skills redeveloped, reimagined, focused on, spiraled through. So we're looking at our curriculum. Last year, our teachers invested almost 1,000 hours to redesign curriculum for this year. We anticipate that this will happen again. Last year, our teachers both taught and participated in more than 75 workshops that we ran in-house with over 500 registrants. We anticipate that to happen again this year coming. In fact, it may be even larger as we build out and have learned how to be even more effective teaching and learning together, both in a in-person and a virtual learning environment. Next slide, please. As a conceptual frame, we focus on research. Dr. Will said that we are a research-based organization. We are constantly studying what's the best practice. We built our IB program based on research. We introduced the middle year program 7 years later based on thoughtful, careful research. And there is a large team of folks, some you've heard from this evening, others who are not here this evening, but are working hand in hand, hand in glove with 150 strong teachers to figure out how do we ensure that we know where students are as they return. We analyze performance data. Teachers give internal assessments in IB. They also give common assessments aligned to New York standards because we both respect the New York State standards and International Baccalaureate standards simultaneously. Those internal assessments are common. They are scored commonly. They are studied and analyzed collectively by teachers in partnership with supervisors and other experts in the field. So we are constantly looking at student performance. We have been since September. We continue to, and we will continue to throughout the remainder of this school year. In addition, we look at historical data, the historical data that IB provides, that the Advanced Placement Program, that the College Board provides us. We use that to examine trends and patterns and look at curriculum and look for gaps. We've continued to do that work this year. And so as two ways, we look at our internal classroom assessments, individual student performance based on our own classroom measures. We also look at measures that are externally audited by the International Baccalaureate and we look at historical data. Those are just some of the ways, and you're going to hear from Dr. Cantor and Ms. D'Andrea talking about how we use a multiple measure system. To put a finer point on this, we go from research and then we have program design. So we are well in the process from last year and this year in program design. So we're currently thinking about the summer programs, as I mentioned before. We are examining what was effective last year and making use of that to build our programs for this year. Our professional development is a support structure for student learning. Teachers engage in learning labs. Last summer, more than 600 students participated in one form or another K-12 in summer extension and enrichment programs. There were more than 100 high school students involved in enrichment. Those we called labs because teachers were developing the instruction that they would later use in the hybrid learning environment with students in a basically live lab setting. And so that curriculum is developed, those teachers teach it. That's a part of our professional development approach. We always look for professional development that has direct impact on student learning, and that leads us to the action research part. Action research is an extension of the research that's available internationally, nationally, studied, and peer reviewed. This research is done by teachers with teachers to determine how to effectively change instruction in the most direct and expansive way, but without waiting for the delay in research building. So we do our own research in-house, then we implement, and then we assess, adapt, and adjust. So just to give you an idea of the overarching approach, we always use this approach. We have always used it. It has led us to become one of the most successful IB programs in the country, perhaps. You know, we have one of the largest, the largest and perhaps equally important, equitable. More than 90% of our students participate in these programs. And so we are proud of that, we're accountable for that, and we will support that work as we move from hybrid back to full reopen and back to what we, as Lou has always called, school, when we think about September, with all that we've learned going forward. So as I shift now to Ms. D'Andrea to talk about multiple measures and how we use, to give you a little bit more of a window in, we're also going to speak about some of what we've learned in this hybrid learning environment that we're going to carry forward that is both transformative and we think will change student learning for years and perhaps decades to come. Ms. D'Andrea.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. As Michael mentioned, we've always used multiple measures to gauge where students are and where they're going next. So in other words, we don't look at just one test or one single measure to determine who your child is. We closely examine a variety of assessments, including internal measures, such as formative and summative assessment, student artifacts from the classroom, as well as some of the external measures like IB and AP exams. And so currently, I'm proud to share that the math department is working on reviewing and analyzing IB assessments by coming together to examine student work alongside IB rubrics. This opportunity allows our teachers to engage in really deep, meaningful conversations where student work is at the center. And teachers are asking really critical questions like, what patterns are we noticing? And what does this work tell me about my students' thinking? And where should my instruction go next for this student? And the precise information gathered about our students during these team sessions will be used to strengthen our instruction both immediately this spring and next year. And this is really critical in supporting each and every student as they come back to school for full in-person instruction. In addition to these external measures, our math teachers continue to monitor student progress toward learning goals by using formative assessments, the ongoing check-ins before, during, and after lessons. And again, much credit to the teachers in finding really innovative and creative ways to making sure that they're connected to your students, whether they're fully virtual, in person, or in a hybrid environment. And this has been especially important during this period of hybrid instruction so that our students are continuing to receive targeted feedback both on the days that they're in school if they're a hybrid student, as well as the days that they're working asynchronously at home. And presently, teachers are using all of the information that they've gathered this year about their students to inform our planning for the full return to school. And we believe that using these internal and external measures will provide us with a deeper understanding of each and every student. And because teachers have been doing this critical work all along this entire year, they're aware of each student's discrete individual needs, whether it's problem-solving techniques or approaches to mathematical concepts. And teachers are prepared to support every student when they come back to school. And we've begun using all of these tools and the information that we've collected about student strengths, as well as their particular needs, to inform our summer work and planning for curriculum in the fall. And now I'm gonna pass the next segment of this portion along to Dr. Cantor, who will share some of the highlights that we've learned from hybrid learning.
Thank you. Next slide, thank you. As many of my colleagues mentioned, everyone has experienced the last year differently. In fact, we've actually found that there have been some tremendous benefits within our teaching practice and student learning. We found that in asynchronous environments, students have actually increased their independence, and students have actually learned how to collaborate in new and innovative ways. We've also found even more opportunities for student voice. So for example, in our 9th grade classes, students are engaged in a critical analysis of a book that they chose, an independent book. And in response to that text, students had multiple options of how they wanted to demonstrate their understandings. In the corner of the slide, you can see a picture drawn by a student. This student read the text called Weeping into the Same Moon by Jana Liaz, which is about these two young girls who, one is American and one is a Vietnamese refugee. And it's really a story of their self-discovery and growing friendship. And this student in this 9th grade class chose to draw about one character from multiple perspectives, how people see her and how she sees herself. You could see that demonstrated in the image. This experience has allowed teachers to gain insight into the students both as learners and as people. The teacher learned that how the student sees the character, how they see the world, and how she sees herself in this response. And the option to allow students to respond in any form, any modality, any method, that's agency. That's what gives kids voice and agency. It allows for students to choose how they want to express themselves. And their responses, like this young woman's, reflects their engagement with the text. And this year, teachers built off of what they know. We already know this. We know this about engagement and how to invest kids in the work. And that means leaving room for voice and choice. So as challenging as this year has been, and it really has been for all of us, the pandemic has really confirmed what we already know about the classroom, what we already know about voice and choice. And we will carry this forward right now when students return, and as we plan for this summer, and as we plan for the fall and as we move forward. Thank you. I'm going to ask Marlene Colonna to go to the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. The word challenge has been said over and over again this evening, but there's one challenge that's actually helped our students grow in their ability to become lifelong learners. During hybrid instruction, it was a necessity for students to become more independent in their learning. At all levels, students have had greater choice as we embraced a more performance-based assessment model. Students have had more autonomy during their asynchronous days to structure their work to fit schedules that work for them. And students have had to learn new technological platforms to communicate with teachers and to be able to collaborate with classmates. These lifelong skills figure heavily in the MYP and the DP program frameworks. Throughout the program, skills like self-management, independent research, and effective interpersonal communication are explicitly taught to students. In the middle years program, this instruction begins in 6th grade and it carries all the way through to 10th. Jen Egan was able to mention some of this to us when we were talking about the approaches to learning. Well, the approaches to learning really provide kids with meaningful opportunities to work on those skill sets that don't live in a particular subject or in a particular classroom, but skill sets that will help them be successful in whatever their endeavors are in college and even afterward. When we think about creating opportunities in individual classrooms for social emotional learning, it really follows this idea of helping students develop their voice, develop their independence, and try to help them see how they can bring a project of their own from the beginning to the end. This is a perfect example. In the 10th grade, our students engage in something called the MYP Personal Learning Project. It doesn't live in any one particular class or any one particular subject. Students are asked to think about what their passion is. What are they really interested in? It might be something that they've always been curious about, or it might be an endeavor that they're trying to develop some expertise in. For instance, maybe somebody wants to learn how to play the guitar, or maybe a student wants to build a robot. Maybe a student wants to write a short story from beginning to end. Whatever they're interested in, they choose an area. And then they do research, independent research into what's being done in that area and what kind of a project they might want to design. When they determine what kind of a project they might want to do, they have to develop a plan, an action plan from beginning to end, figuring out how much time they can allot and what resources they're going to need, and try to seek out support. The students keep something we call a process journal, where they check in at pivotal points in the project and they reflect on how it's going and what areas potentially it's not going well, and where they might find resources to overcome some of those barriers. Of course, they're doing this all with the careful, nurturing guidance of their teachers. But it's so important, the feeling of success, to bring a project through from the beginning to the end when you were the driving force behind it. This is a perfect example of enabling students to have voice, have agency, and really grow into themselves. You know, the typical high school classroom can sometimes be stifling. We have to learn a lot of things that might not be our own personal interest, and there's very few opportunities in a non-IB program to really grow into yourself. But this is definitely one of them. And I'm going to ask Jen to come and speak to us again for a minute, because I know that the 10th graders are currently working on their projects right now, and some of them are incredibly exciting. And Jen, if you wouldn't mind, could you just share a little bit of what they'll be working on when they return to the building?
Sure. So thank you so much, Marlene, for that wonderful description of the personal project. And I hope it's clear that IB, intending to make this an enjoyable experience for students. And while our students are at different stages of development with their personal project, a lot of the work has started already. And when they return to school, the work will continue journaling to monitor their progress towards their goal, working with their supervisors, who I would just really like to take a moment to thank for all of their hard work and support of our students, and especially to Lindsay Riley, who has really done an amazing job in coordinating the personal project at the high school. So students are going to be continuing a lot of the great work that they've already done. And just to name a few personal project topics that have come up this year, we have students creating cookbooks of family recipes, learning how to play jazz drums, making a thermoelectric generator. It's so impressive. Students are analyzing the evolution of pop culture as depicted from film across the 20th century, and writing an instructional book for beginning trumpet players. So really, there is just such a wide range of topics that are so interesting. And if you want to think about student agency and student voice, what I'm most excited about is partnering with our 10th grade students to introduce this project to our 9th grade students, because they are truly leaders in this work and will set a great example for our students next year.
And as you point out, Mrs. Egan, that I'm seeing some questions in the chat. I think people are a little bit confused about why we're talking about these things. Let me help you understand why we're talking. We're talking about what your kids are going to be doing when they come back to school. We're also trying to remind you that what they've been doing before they return fully to school is aligned with where they will land when they return. So all of these things are not something new. They're an extension of what we've been doing, except in a more comprehensive way. I would also remind you that one of the things that we're talking about over and over again here is that the work that we're always doing is to build the ability for your kids to adapt, to advocate, to understand that they have a responsibility to themselves and others. And we're talking to you about how we have planned that. It seems maybe we didn't make this clear. So let me re-emphasize. We have a plan for their social and emotional return. We have a plan that identifies how we'll keep them safe. We have a plan to determine where they are going to start because we've looked at their assessments. We have a plan that we're building based on those assessments for the summer program so that when we get back to school in September, they'll be absolutely where they need to be. Or if they're leaving, we're going to try to make sure we have enough culminating experiences to make the end of their senior year experience meaningful. We have about 2 more slides and then we're going to sum up for the evening. Next slide, please. Mrs. Melchevsky. Thank you. And who's going to talk about what our summer program will look like and the 3 prongs of this very important stool? Is that me? Oh, it's me. How silly.
Lou, it's you. If you, I spoke to it some, I'll jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can all. So we're very concerned that we not have a summer program that looks like other summer programs. It's going to be different than it was last year, as Michael said. It's going to be based on where we find your kids end up. There was a question in the chat about the Regents exams. Ms. Buckham will tell you the 4 exams that are going to be administered, and I'll tell you what I think about the Regents exams. I've been advocating for all state exams to be given not at the end of the year, but in September. Haven't been successful yet because I think they'd be more valuable as an entry exam than an exit exam. But we will never use one exam to determine whether or not your kids have been successful. That's what we learned from Veronica and Jamie, that we use multiple measures. So what are the 3 components of the summer program? Well, there's been some academic loss through no fault of anyone's. Kids have had to learn in a different environment. We're assessing where that loss is. In that first bucket, that academic support will be an invitation-only program. If we think you have a learning deficit or you need credit recovery, we're going to invite you there. But we also want to remind kids that learning can be joyful. So we're building a summer set of enrichment experiences around workshops and IB institutes that will be open to most kids, if not all. And we're also going to try to build a group of activities before kids get back to school in the summer that are nothing more than a celebration of community. Because as you know, if you have a 9th grader, they only know half the 9th grade. They haven't seen the other half. We're going to bring the kids back together before school reopens in some way to celebrate them as a class. So those 3 things will be coming to you soon. We're still studying the data to make sure that these are uniquely developed based on the needs of your actual kids, not some generic program. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Buchema likes to remind herself all the time, it's been a great year for Harrison High School, but there are lots of good things still ahead of us. Kim?
Yeah, there are a lot of good things ahead of us, and I think a lot of our parents with seniors on this call have been waiting for this slide for a little while now. So we do have a lot of events that we have been planning towards. Some of those events will be in person for students, but because of the constraints of seating and social distancing, because if we don't have those dividers up, we still have to be at 6 feet unless you live in a household together. So that results in a lot of them being live streamed out. For example, the way we did this fall with our National Honor Society for last year's inductees, it will luckily be a joint ceremony, so we won't have separate Husky and Pride ceremonies. It'll be one, but in that case, that would be a live streamed event. And our musical, of course, will be virtual for this school year. The junior auction, because that came up in the chat a little bit ago. Yes, it is occurring. It will be a virtual event as well. And yes, there will be raffle tickets for those junior spaces. If I'm missing anything on that, Mrs. Griffo, just chime right in for me on any of these. Relay for Life will also be a virtual event, but they are still in the process of planning whether or not there will be any in-person components to that as well, with the date of May 22nd there. So prom, yay. We will have a prom event on June 3rd. Our senior class officers are in the process of planning a meeting with our senior class, of course, with building administration there to share what that will look like. But it will be an outdoor event. I will have a formal component, but it will just be for our senior class right now due to the limitations we have on the amount of students that can attend. And we have a large senior class. We do have the the spring play as well. That's going to be a virtual event. Senior Awards Night and our Senior Athletic Awards will be very similar events with those, just like National Honor Society, being in person for students and live streamed out to parents. And the date for our graduation is a little bit pending, and the only reason it's pending, it is happening. Our PTA is very excited to plan that with us. It is a keeper for future years going forward, a real celebration of our graduates. And something that the community can really get involved with in doing. And the reason we're holding off on the date for that is we are waiting to hear about those 4 Regents exams, because right now the state has filed for a waiver on them. But as long as those 4 exams still stand, we will be planning it right before those exams start. So that being said, Dr. Will said I give those exams, and I will Algebra 1, which is primarily given in Harrison in 8th grade. So the 3 that will be predominantly here at the high school will be Earth Science, Living Environment, or known as biology, as well as the English Regents given the junior year. That those 3 exams will occur at the high school, and any student that needs to take the Algebra 1 at the high school until we hear any differently on the waiver that the state has filed for. I'm sorry, yes, that the Board of Regents has filed for with the federal government.
And before we thank you, Kim, before we close, there's one other question, and it's a question that's posed in an insulting and disrespectful way, but I want to honor it because it really helps me close the meeting with something that I think is so important. Your teachers have worked harder than they ever have in their lives. They have flexed, they have been adaptable, they have extended themselves to kids in incredible ways, well beyond what anybody can reasonably expect. So I can assure the individual that's wondering if our teachers will waste the time of their IB students, the answer to that question is no, because they respect and care too much for their kids to ever waste their time. Secondarily, we will always do everything we can to make the learning experience engaging. And here's what I need to say to all of you, and I said it at every single meeting that I've had, and this is number 6. We need to make sure that we don't forget for 1 minute what teachers have experienced during this pandemic. Initially, they didn't know whether they were putting their lives at risk to come to work, and they came to work. So we need to make sure that we extend them the grace and the respect and the honor that they have earned in caring for your children, sometimes above the needs of their own families. And so as we go forward, the most important thing we can do if we want to succeed is to give each other grace, to make sure that we speak thoughtfully with kindness and generosity of spirit. And anytime we don't do that, we disrespect ourselves, we disrespect our children, and we profoundly disrespect the work of a faculty that has worked tirelessly since this pandemic began. Michael mentioned the thousands of hours they put in the summer, the incredible preparation that they had to do, the multiple times I've had to ask them to shift from one model to another. So if I seem a little bit warm, it's because I am. I'm passionate about what we do, and I can assure you that the human beings that have cared for your kids every step of the way have done everything within their power to make this work for your children. And I know almost everybody universally appreciates and respects that. But remember how easy it is to wound someone with a careless word or a careless thought. When we come back, we owe it to one another to remember that everybody has been through a difficult period of time. So if my faculty is out there tonight, I profoundly appreciate everything that you have done. And I'm going to pause because I always recognize teachers, but I want to recognize my panel tonight. These are the people that have been working just as tirelessly and on weekends and without vacations to do contact tracing, to keep our schools open, and our coaches who have done incredible work. Even when they weren't able to coach, they were reaching out to kids to maintain their spirit and their connection. And our fine and performing arts people who found ways to make things happen that were almost impossible. And to our Board of Education who get paid a glass of water for every meeting that they attend, whose children are in our schools with you, who have been tireless in their devotion. To our Education Foundation, who have extended themselves in ways that have been impossible when they couldn't fundraise. This is a time when we need to appreciate and celebrate one another. We're about to reopen school. And if we don't show an ethic of care for one another, none of this will be worth anything. The children are always watching, and they're always reading, and they know exactly who we are and what we stand for. And I can tell you, I couldn't be prouder of what we have done together. Madam Principal, I think you have one slide before we close. Do you not?
I have my favorite slide, if Kelly can advance the slides, and there it is. This is actually a scene from last year's graduation, which was one for the books, although we have another one coming up that most likely will be one for the books as well. So if you can see that center picture, that is actually in the background, all of our graduates from last year that were put into this picture all together, since we couldn't have the traditional cap toss. And we will look for those same type of ways based on what the guidance is at the time of graduation as to what we can do and what it will look like. But I can tell you it will be as great a celebration as it was last school year on Friday, June 25th of this school year. It will not be any less than amazing for our seniors this year, because they deserve nothing less than the best. So
yes, hopefully we won't be in Wegmans parking lot. Hopefully we'll be at Harrison High School. Unfortunately, purchase is already closed for the year. But if you can look behind me, we want to see hats in the air again. Again, thank you for staying the course. I hope you leave with the understanding of how well we know your kids, how well prepared we are. I thank you all for staying for 2 hours and 19 minutes. It's a comprehensive high school. We had a lot of ground to cover. I certainly appreciate everybody who stuck around and all of your hard work. We're going to get through this together. We're going to get on the other side of this, and we're going to celebrate your children. So have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.